The night was darker than any other night in the kingdom of Valoreth. Storm clouds covered the three moons, and thunder rolled across the sky like the drums of war. In the streets of the capital city, thousands of elves moved silently through the shadows. They carried weapons hidden under their cloaks. Their faces showed years of suffering and anger. Tonight, everything would change. Commander Liara stood at the front of the rebel army. She was tall with silver hair that fell past her shoulders. Her eyes burned with determination. For 20 years, she had watched King Malachar destroy her people. He had taken their food. He had stolen their children for his mines. He had killed anyone who spoke against him, but Liara had survived. She had built an army in secret, and now that army was ready. Standing beside her was Captain Marcus Chun, a human soldier from Earth. He had arrived on this world 3 years ago when his ship crashed in the northern mountains. The elves had found him dying in the snow. They had saved his life. In return, he had taught them how to fight like humans fought. He had shown them tactics that no elf had ever seen before. Marcus looked at the palace in the distance. It was a massive structure made of white stone and gold. It sat on top of a hill, surrounded by high walls and armed guards. Most people said it was impossible to attack. Most people were wrong. "Are your people ready?" Liara asked him quietly. Marcus nodded. "They know what to do. When the signal comes, they will move." The rebels had spent months planning this attack. They had studied every guard rotation. They had mapped every tunnel under the city. They had even placed their own people inside the palace as servants. Nothing was left to chance. In the palace, King Malachar sat on his golden throne. He was an old elf with cruel eyes and a twisted smile. He wore robes made from the finest silk, taken from villages that could barely afford to eat. Rings covered his fingers, each one stolen from a noble family he had destroyed. He believed he was untouchable. He believed his power would last forever. His advisor, Lord Draven, rushed into the throne room. His face was pale with fear. "My king," Draven said, his voice shaking. "There are reports of movement in the city. Large groups of people are gathering in the streets." Malachar laughed. It was a cold, empty sound. "Let them gather. What can they do against my army? I have 10,000 soldiers. I have mages who can burn entire neighborhoods with a single spell. These peasants are nothing." But Draven did not look convinced. "Sire, perhaps we should increase the guards around the palace, just to be safe." The king waved his hand dismissively. "Do whatever you want. I am going to sleep. Wake me when these fools are in chains." He stood up and walked toward his private chambers. He had no idea that his world was about to end. Outside the palace walls, Marcus gave the signal. It was a simple flash of light from a small device he had built. Instantly, the rebels began to move. They came from every direction. They emerged from buildings, from sewers, from hidden passages that had been forgotten for centuries. There were not just hundreds of them, there were thousands. The palace guards saw them coming. They sounded the alarm. Bells rang throughout the city. Soldiers rushed to take their positions on the walls. But they were not prepared for what happened next. Marcus had taught the rebels something that elves had never used before: coordinated attacks. Instead of charging blindly at the walls, the rebels worked in teams. Some groups created distractions on one side while others attacked from another. Some groups used fire to create smoke that blocked the archers' view. Other groups used ropes and hooks to climb the walls where the guards were thinnest. The palace mages tried to use their magic. They sent fireballs into the crowd. They created walls of ice to block the rebels' path. But Marcus had prepared for this too. He had identified every mage in the palace. He had assigned special teams to target them first. Before the mages could do serious damage, arrows found them. They fell from the walls, their magic dying with them. Liara led the main assault on the front gate. She carried a sword that had belonged to her father, a general who had been executed by the king 15 years ago. She fought with the strength of someone who had nothing left to lose. Every swing of her blade carried the weight of her grief and her rage. The palace guards were well trained. They formed defensive lines. They tried to push the rebels back. But they had never faced an enemy like this. The rebels did not fight like traditional elven warriors. They fought like humans. They were unpredictable. They were relentless. They did not care about honor or tradition. They only cared about winning. Marcus fought alongside the elves. He moved through the battle like water through rocks. His fighting style was different from anything the guards had seen. He did not waste energy on fancy movements. Every action had a purpose. Every strike was designed to end a fight quickly. One of the guards recognized him. "The human!" the guard shouted. "Kill the human!" Several guards rushed toward Marcus. They thought that killing him would break the rebel spirit. They were wrong. Marcus ducked under the first sword. He grabbed the guard's arm and threw him into the others. Before they could recover, he had disarmed two of them and knocked a third unconscious. "Humans are harder to kill than you think," Marcus said with a grim smile. Inside the palace, King Malachar woke to the sound of screaming. He rushed to his window and looked down at the courtyard. What he saw made his blood turn cold. Rebels were everywhere. His guards were falling. The walls had been breached. For the first time in decades, the king felt fear. He did not think about his soldiers. He did not think about his kingdom. He only thought about himself. He grabbed a bag of gold and ran toward the secret passage behind his bed. This passage led to tunnels under the palace. From there, he could escape to the coast and sail away to another land. But when he opened the passage door, he found someone waiting for him. It was a young elf named Taris. He was only 19 years old. His parents had died in the king's mines when he was a child. He had grown up as an orphan, surviving on the streets, eating garbage, and sleeping in the cold. He had joined the rebels when he was 15. For 4 years, he had waited for this moment. "Going somewhere, Your Majesty?" Taris asked. His voice was calm, but his eyes were filled with hatred. The king backed away. "I will give you gold. I will give you land. I will give you anything you want. Just let me go." Taris stepped forward. "Can you give me back my mother? Can you give me back my father? Can you give me back my childhood?" The king fell to his knees. Tears streamed down his face. "Please," he begged, "have mercy." It was pathetic. This was the man who had shown no mercy to anyone. This was the man who had ordered the deaths of thousands. Now he cried like a child because his own life was in danger. Taris looked at him with disgust. "You will face justice. Not from me. From the people you hurt." He tied the king's hands and dragged him out of the room. By dawn, the battle was over. The palace belonged to the rebels. The remaining guards had surrendered. The nobles who had supported the king were arrested. For the first time in 50 years, the people of Valoreth were free. Liara stood on the palace balcony and looked down at the crowd below. Thousands of elves filled the streets. They cheered. They cried. They hugged each other. Many of them had never known a day without fear. Now, that fear was gone. Marcus stood beside her. He looked tired but satisfied. "What happens now?" he asked. Liara took a deep breath. "Now we rebuild. We create a government that serves the people instead of stealing from them. We make sure that no one ever has to suffer like we did. It won't be easy," Marcus warned. "There will be people who want to take power for themselves. There will be those who want to go back to the old ways." Liara nodded. "I know, but we have something we did not have before. Hope." King Malachar was brought before the people that afternoon. He was no longer wearing his fine robes. He was dressed in the same rags that the prisoners in his dungeons had worn. He looked small and weak. The crowd jeered at him. Some threw rotten vegetables. Others simply stared in silence. Liara addressed the crowd. "This man ruled over us for 50 years. He took everything from us, our food, our families, our dignity. He believed he was above us. He believed he could do anything he wanted without consequences. Today, he learns the truth. No one is above justice. The king was taken away to await trial. He would be judged by the people he had wronged. Whatever his fate, it would be decided by those who had suffered under his rule. In the weeks that followed, the new government took shape. Liara was asked to lead, but she refused to take the title of queen. Instead, she helped create a council made up of representatives from every region of the kingdom. Every voice would be heard. Every person would have a say in how they were governed. Marcus was offered a place on the council, but he declined. "This is your world," he told Liara. "Your people need to build their own future. I can help, but I should not lead." Instead, he became a teacher. He opened a school where he taught the young elves about Earth. He taught them about science and mathematics. He taught them about the mistakes humans had made and the lessons they had learned. He hoped that by sharing this knowledge, he could help the elves avoid the same errors. Years passed. Valoreth became a prosperous nation. The mines were reformed. Workers were paid fairly and treated with respect. The farms produced more food than ever before. Trade routes opened with neighboring kingdoms. The suffering of the past became a distant memory. But the people never forgot. They built a monument in the center of the capital. It was a statue of an elf and a human standing side by side, their hands raised toward the sky. At the base of the statue, there was an inscription. "Freedom is not given, it is taken. Remember those who fought. Honor those who died. Never let tyranny rise again." And on the anniversary of the rebellion, every year, the people would gather at the monument. They would light candles and tell stories of that night. They would speak the names of the fallen, and they would renew their promise to protect the freedom they had won. The corrupt king was gone. His palace now served as a museum, a reminder of the darkness that had once covered the land. And in its halls, visitors could see the simple weapons the rebels had used, the plans they had drawn, and the flag they had carried into battle. It was proof that ordinary people could change the world. It was proof that even the mightiest tyrant could fall. And it was proof that when different peoples worked together, when they shared their knowledge and their strength, they could achieve the impossible. Liara lived to be very old. In her final days, she was asked what she was most proud of. She smiled and said, "I am proud that we did not become what we fought against. We had the chance to take revenge. We had the chance to become tyrants ourselves, but we chose a different path. We chose justice. We chose compassion. That is the greatest victory of all." She died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by her family and friends. The entire kingdom mourned her passing, but they also celebrated her life. She had shown them what was possible when people refused to accept injustice. And somewhere in the countryside, in a small house near a river, an old human named Marcus sat on his porch and watched the sunset. He thought about the journey that had brought him to this world. He thought about the friends he had made and the battles he had fought. He thought about the young elves he had taught, who were now leaders in their own right. He smiled. For a man who had crashed on an alien world with nothing, he had found something precious. He had found a home. He had found a purpose. And he had helped write a chapter of history that would never be forgotten. The 3 moons rose over Valoreth, and the stars came out one by one. In the cities and villages, children listened to stories about the night the rebels stormed the palace. They learned about courage and sacrifice. They learned that one person can make a difference, but many people working together can change everything. And they carried those lessons with them for the rest of their lives.